debtor's budget in an election year. Just how did Uhuru do it? It was budget day in Nairobi today, a whole 2 months early than normal, and we will be looking out for any abnormalities in Uhuru's numbers and President Kenyatta administration's final budget. That national budget in a week that we also discovered that helicopters don't have windscreens except broken ones. The exceptional retired Colonel Paul Denge would tell you it is the air shield of his chopper that got broken. Nevertheless, we will be tracking one stone backwards tonight. And just how stony is the path called nominations for political parties? The month of tears and shivers and the gnashing of teeth is here, but who will go first? On the memo tonight, Jamila has penned a love letter to all the young men of Kenya. On the punchline, Gashuri is shedding premium tears. And on Kai Kai's kicker, it's raining cats and stones. My take tonight, marital incompetence. Open the curtains and the Uhuru divorce. This is News Gang.
In order to enhance good governance and scale up our fight against corruption, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 3.6 billion for the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Kenya shilling 3.4 billion for the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, Kenya shilling 8.4 billion for the Criminal Investigation Department Services, and Kenya shilling 6.4 billion for the Office of the Auditor General.
Yes, and it was budget day. What a long day it has been. And once again, Gashuri, you were the man of the moment. But before we get to you, allow me to just remind you that our sign language gangster tonight is Wilson Mushora. So you always seem to be where the action is.
Yes. Quite literally.
You know, tell us, this was the last budget being read under the Uhuru Kenyatta administration. He's not going to implement it. It was also the last for CS Uhuru. Well, unless, of course, he gets reappointed in the next administration, who knows. But set for us the scene today, was it any different? Did it feel any different from the last 9 years?
It didn't feel any different. Actually, I felt today was a little more low-key than the other times.
Yeah?
I think I've covered that budget 9 times. This was the 10th. The fanfare that used to be there is no longer there. No red carpet, no nothing, no drama, just, the arrival and the reading of the highlights. So I would say even the number of MPs today, way lower. I think the parliamentarians have already decided that whichever way it goes, there are more urgent things to deal with, the nominations that are coming up in the next few days or so. And we're in that political season where members of parliament, especially those who used to be in the Jubilee Party, and I say that very cautiously because they have not defected, were not interested today. And the few that were there were saying not so nice things about the budget. And on the other hand, those who were in the opposition back then, if you may like it that way, were saying some very nice things about the budget today. I would have expected that the presidential contenders would come to Parliament today, at least to take a listen to what they would be expected to implement after August, once the elections are conducted. Only Raila Odinga, the ODM leader, was there. And of course, the Speaker of the National Assembly, who is himself a presidential contender. And I remember interviewing him, and he was saying he has presided over the House sittings. This was the 10th time. So he has been there continuously when the budget has been read in the course of the Uhuru Kenyatta, William Ruto administration for the 2 terms, or the Uhuru administration, if you may like. And this was the last one. Actually, he said he doesn't think he's no longer interested in being Speaker anymore. So I would say quite low-key today compared to the other times. But I think it is also the realization of the political times that we are in, that either way, malizana na hii kitu, tuende uchaguzi, so that whoever implements it gets an opportunity to do so.
Absolutely. But to be fair, in our budgeting process now, there's really never a secret to what is in that briefcase. Usually the budget policy statement is out. I mean, the budget making process is a year-long one. It's very consultative. It's very public. And so, you remember that solemn moment when the finance minister, as you know, at that time would come out with that briefcase and would all be waiting with bated breath to know what was in it. Now we basically know what he's tabling. I mean, the estimates are usually out. Of course, this time there was a bit of that as well. And of course, Linus, the big question is obviously tying it to the political cycle we're in at the moment, and all of these massive promises that have been made by, all of the political, or should we say presidential contenders. With this budget, what sort of budget are they, or economy are they inheriting from Uhuru Kenyatta?
I think this was a routine budget, one that they really just wanted to get out of the way. It is a final year budget for President Uhuru Kenyatta, a final year or end-term budget for CS Uhuru Yatani. And he presented it to a nearly empty House. And that in itself was a statement about the level of interest, especially among political players, on this budget. And of course, there is still, and you've explained it quite well about the change in the way the budget is presented. It's no longer the old secret that it used to be. It is an ongoing process. They'll tell you that the budgeting process began well before September last year, and it's been ongoing. It's also very consultative with Parliament being involved. But you can still see us as a country being caught up in the confusion between the Westminster style of presenting the budget and this American new Constitution of Kenya 2010 style, which is a continuous consultative process. Which is why you see him carrying the briefcase. The briefcase used to be something that bears the secrets and the goodies. And, media would always put the picture there and then say, what is in it?
Yes.
Of course, we know what has been in it for several months now. It's no longer the budget that used to be under the heavily parliamentary system that we had before 2010. Again, the timing of this, when they changed the date from June, the traditional June to April, it is because obviously, they want to fit in the election calendar. What will be happening on this date in June? A lot of politicking, a lot of campaigns ahead of the election, which will then just be about 2 months away. So this explains why they've had to move it forward. And
now that we're talking about the fact that, this is no big secret, and I don't know if we'll be able to get a shot of that, but one of the things I found really interesting was when the convoy was moving from Treasury to Parliament, and suddenly the pace of the convoy picked up, and it was lined with security and policemen, and they were all running like they're guarding this huge secret, and I thought, we know. What's the fuss about? Like, it seemed absolutely awkward, maybe a little unnecessary, but I guess maybe the show and pomp and honor of it. But Jamila, the numbers are there and they're not looking too good. Many saying that this is not a Mananchi budget. It's coming at a time when, there's a fuel crisis in the country that is still yet to be resolved. The high cost of living in that story that we, published today, that was done by Njoroge Gatete. We even had another one that was produced yesterday by Mashirima Kapombe and Crispin from Kisii. So, what are those numbers looking like?
The numbers are not looking good, Yvonne. When we listen to the budget, even in the past, the one thing wait is to hear is umeongeza bei ya maziwa, umeongeza bei ya mkate, umeongeza bei. Those products that we use every day. And someone may say, well, they didn't raise the prices of any of those products. Was this a relief budget? I don't think so, Yvonne, because Rampe said it's a 3.3 trillion shillings budget. And the government has to collect up to 2.4 trillion shillings from taxes, there'll be grants of 33 billion, and there'll still be a deficit of about 862 billion shillings. But Yvonne, the minister talked about how they're going to propose to raise excise tax by, I think, 10% on a number of products. But he refused to disclose what those products were. He said this will be in the finance bill. We still don't know what they will be. Although they're saying petroleum products have been exempted because of the prices of the rising cost of petrol. But I think the devil is in the details, Yvonne, because what we don't know about the taxes, the excise taxes that the minister is proposing in the finance bill. But Yvonne, I think we need to look at also the fact that we borrow locally and we borrow externally. I want to talk about June 2021, where our total debt was at about 7.7 trillion.
Yes.
4.4 trillion was external loans, 3.7 trillion domestic. That's almost 50%. 50-50. But then you look at the interest on these loans. Out of the 687 billion shillings that interest, 134.5 is foreign, the external loans, and then 553 billion is from local debt. What does that tell you? You expected, if you're borrowing 50-50, probably we're going to be paying debt 50-50.
Yeah, of course.
But it shows you that our local interest rates in the country are very high.
Yeah.
But then if the government is borrowing as much as that, 3.7 trillion, what is left for the private sector? For you, Yvonne, for you, Gashuri, for me to borrow. Because we need to be able to borrow so that, well, we can help our businesses grow, we can employ people, we can have more people paying taxes, we can inua maisha ya wananchi wa kawaida, and that's not happening. And finally, I think the government needs to think about moving out from the local market. I don't want people to say, so where will they get the money from? But then now you need to increase your tax base so that you're able to raise the money to be able to fund all your activities. So Yvonne, it is not really a relief budget, I guess, because yes, we've seen that the government is proposing to raise taxes on a few things here, including introducing excess tax on advertising of alcohol, betting and gaming products, to discourage the use of e-cigarettes, is going to introduce a new formula of taxing liquid nicotine, whose excess tax will now be 70 shillings per milliliter. That's all well and good, but as I said, the devil is in the details.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, this being sort of a legacy year for President Uhuru Kenyatta as he leaves, like you mentioned, Jamila, the issue of debt is a huge question. I mean, I think during President Kenyatta's second term, the public debt has grown from 4.4 trillion in June of 2017 to 8.6 trillion in June of this year. So that's an increase of 4.2 trillion shillings. And that's just during his second term alone. In fact, if you take a look at, from the time he came into office to date, our public debt has grown by 470%. It was actually 1.8 trillion when President Kibaki retired to 8.6 trillion shillings in June, and now, of course, we're looking to pass that debt ceiling of 9 trillion shillings. That was supposed to take us to 2024, but we're certainly going to breach that 2 years earlier. And for me, the interesting thing, like we said, it's a budget of 3.3 trillion, but a third of that will be going towards paying our debt, and by this going towards paying the interest.
First.
Not the principal amount.
Exactly.
So that's a third going to debt repayment. And this is what makes me not envy the next holder of that office, because no matter all the big promises, we'll put this money here, we'll have Babak here, we'll have 6,000 shillings, we'll have 100 billion going to SMEs or whatever is being thrown out there, from all sides of the political divide. It then tells you when they get into that office, they're going to have to face some tough realities. And some of these things, debt is a first pay. So you pay that first before you start thinking about any other plans or promises that you have made. And I think for me, it all boils, we can talk about numbers and throw that in, as much as we want. But I think for me, the bottom line of a budget beyond the numbers is really about good governance and prudent use of funds.
True.
As long as you do that and you stick within the plan, and of course you deal with matters like corruption so that you are getting value for money, even from what you're borrowing, then it doesn't matter. You can call it 3.3, you can call it what year on year we've continued to say is the biggest budget yet, but for whom?
Exactly.
Yvonne, you're on to a very interesting point. After listening to everything that has been said about this budget, especially in the last 2-3 years or so, today, when we were interviewing the Speaker in his office, he said something that I found very, very interesting, actually fundamental. He said the parliamentarians ought not to go out there and speak about some of these things. Let them use the resources that are in Parliament, learn what is happening in relation to the budget-making process, let them prosecute the content of the budget.
In the House.
In the House, right in the House. Because you see, I've seen a scenario where quite a number of MPs lament with us on Twitter. They lament with every
At
other
press conferences.
and press conferences and rallies. Yet, when you ask them what they're doing, where they're supposed to be doing these things, very little is happening. And by the way, Parliament has one of the best establishments in terms of a reservoir of knowledge, the Parliamentary Budget Office.
Correct.
I wonder how many MPs make use of that reservoir of knowledge, because this is where they would get a lot of information that they can take to the floor of the House in form of motions, statements, bills, and so on and so forth. But making noise out there is not helpful. But also, it turns back to us as the electorate. When you're electing your member of parliament, do you ever sit down to think, reflect, consider the kind of a person you're electing to parliament? Do they have the capacity to deal with some of these fundamental issues that are coming up that touch on your day-to-day life? You know, your taxation is a parliamentary business. The allocation of money to various ministries and so on and so forth is a parliamentary process. So if you elect a member of parliament who has no idea what is happening, who is rarely in the house, then that person or that choice that you make is a forced choice, and you have to live with it for the next 5 years. Absolutely. I think that is the clarion call that we need to make to our viewers.
Yeah, correct. Linus?
No, I think just to add to what Francis is saying in terms of the budget-making process, the people that are not heard of on this day that do a wonderful job, upon whom the real burden of these processes lie. These are civil servants whose names you don't get to know. They sit in the Parliamentary Budget Office, but they also do sit in the Budget Office in Treasury, which is where now the experts in government are to draw up the budget, because the Cabinet Secretary is really the tail end of the process, and a process that is pushed by a very able team of civil servants.
Yeah, correct. And I think just a reminder to everybody that from no other time in Kenya's history, the Constitution of Kenya 2010 and the Public Finance Management Act 2012, that's the PFM Act, has really empowered MPs, the role that they play in the budgeting process, in deciding allocations, just to add on to what you've both said. And you hear them in various fora saying, yeah, we have failed. But yeah, so what you gonna do about it? Yeah, and maybe if you think you failed, the right thing to do is usually to say, look, I think I have failed in the role of oversight, passing legislation, taxes, so maybe it's time for me to step aside, but this is Kenya.
But also a parliament that has been held captive by the executive.
Absolutely.
You know, the 2013 to 2017?
Yeah, they absolutely did their bidding. In fact, I've heard some people say, Wanjiru Gikonyo, the executive director of the Institute for Social Accountability today, said that Parliament was seen as an extension of
the executive.
Yeah,
yes,
and it was seen as a branch of it.
Actually,
so it was
actually put it more plainly, an appendage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when you look at those,
just to amend, it's not they've not been captured. They are willing captives. They're very, very happy to be there.
Yeah.
Look at the behavior of the 2013 to 2017 Parliament, and how it basically handed itself to State House. It could be running from Harambee House or State House, which is why indeed the processes are stipulated in Article 201 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 in terms of public finance management are yet to be realized because of these delays. There's a whole 10-year delay because you have a parliament that hasn't really owned the space that it has been given. You see, we borrowed heavily from the American Constitution. So when you hear of a majority leader in the US, even the president respects that person. But in Kenya, the majority leader, what do? They organize parliamentary group meetings in some tent to do certain things. In the US, the parliamentary majority leader is a very, very powerful person who can amend that budget and tell the president, you're not going to go that way. So we're still at aspirational stages, and I think we have wasted 10 years. It's going into the 10th year. Let's see what the next parliament will do, whether it will actually drive this process. We should have seen the executive negotiating with Parliament about the contents of this budget, not the other way around.
Yvonne, I find it interesting when we speak to some of these legislators, some who are on the budget committee, who were on the right, we can say right side of government 5 years ago, and who've changed sides now, how they talk. And it makes me wonder whether if they had not changed sides, would they have been talking the way they are? If they're noticing things that are wrong now, why are they talking about it now? Why didn't they point it out then when they were in the right side of government, you're letting things go wrong, but now because you are opposing the government, you're talking about it. This double speak really is what has caused us a lot of problems. We need to be honest as leaders. It doesn't matter which side of the political divide you sit on.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, you know, we should give you some clips for Jana Juicy on Summer
Juicy Jana.
2022, particularly, you know, about what people were saying about taxation then and what they're saying today. Yeah. All right. So let's take a break. Hini town. Absolutely. This is News Gang. So we have much more to talk about on the political front. The ugly side of electoral violence reared its head again in the last 7 days. But is it also a case of double standards by the security officials? We have that and much more, including nominations headache and just what is happening within coalitions before the ink is dry. Wanateta sema, didn't they say hakuna makasiriko? And less than a week later, kulikuwa na makasiriko. We'll be talking about that and much more on News Gang when we return. The hashtag is News Gang. We'll be right back.